All right, we're good.
This episode of CelloChat is brought to you by Carriage House Violins of Johnson String Instrument. Please visit us at www.carriagehouseviolins.com.
Hello, everyone. This is super exciting. Good afternoon. Afternoon here in Boston. Hello, wherever you are in the world. My name is LELAND PHILIP KO. I'm a 25-year-old cellist, born and raised in the Boston area. And Paul Katz was my teacher growing up. And I remember when Cello Bello used to be maybe just a handful of videos on YouTube of him teaching little nuggets of information with students, and now it seems to have blossomed into this whole community worldwide, and almost a little surreal to be hosting a cello chat, and feels weird to be kind of just talking at a screen. I'll try and keep this not too long, and then we can get into Q&A. Something that I think about a lot in general, but have been thinking about a lot recently in particular, is sort of I feel like there's a lot of self-doubt and self-criticism in the music world. I see it definitely in myself. I see it in my friends and my colleagues at school here at NEC. Without putting like a value judgment on it, it's just something that I wonder about a lot. I don't know if this doubt is sort of an inherent result of just intense study of a thing, or in result of isolation in a practice room for many hours, or if it's the result of, a profession that isn't particularly stable. It could also be a cultural thing where it's sort of just the way that we talk to ourselves and talk to each other, and we sort of hear it, we pick it up. But even if a certain amount of like doubt or self-criticism is normal, I do wonder sometimes if there's like a framework where that doubt is more balanced by a certain kind of confidence. I can't unpack like all the ways that self-doubt affects us, or like where it all comes from, because it's different for everyone. So maybe the things that I talk about don't hit the mark with like everyone, but I hope maybe this resonates with some of you, and I hope maybe it's a starting point. So here I am searching for like a mentality that sort of works better for me. I'm not a psychologist of any kind. This is sort of just what I would have been thinking about, and what sort of helps me and has helped me, especially recently. 5 sort of points that I just want to get through. I'll see if I can keep track of them all. First one is just sort of defining for ourselves what kind of confidence or what kind of self-doubt, what we mean when we're talking about those things, or what different kinds there are. There's this kind of confidence that comes from like when you nail it, and sure, it feels great in the moment, and it's not worth like nothing. But because our idea of what's right or wrong is like constantly changing and everything, I don't know that this kind of confidence is like sustainable. The opposite is obviously not great either. Like, I don't think we should walk around telling ourselves that we're not good enough, or that we failed something, when in reality it might be fine and great for other people. But because music is really not about right or wrong, because it's about, in my opinion, because it's about, connection, sharing, and this sort of thing, I feel like there's like a different kind of confidence that's sort of required for us to look for, specifically the kind that comes from making decisions or doing things that make you feel like we're ourselves, or the kind of confidence that comes from uplifting others. It's a different feeling. but knowing who you are, how you relate to others, and how you relate to the work that you do, and being, proud of that for whatever you feel it's worth. I feel like this is a kind of confidence that's harder for people to kind of take away. Not that other people are like actively trying to take it away from you, but it's harder to lose that kind of confidence. And on the converse side of that, I feel like there is a kind of self-doubt that can make you excited. Like if you are searching, maybe self-questioning is maybe a better word than self-doubt in this situation, but if you're sort of searching for this kind of self-questioning or doubt that makes you excited, rather than the kind that's just criticism to the point where you get tunnel vision, or you shut down and you're focused on the wrong things. I think kind of that positive self-doubt is much more interesting to me. There's some people who seem like they're driven by this, like that's their primary driving force, and it can be a really powerful thing as long as it's enabling. So you sort of have that kind of confidence, that kind of self-doubt that's not ever rooted in negativity or right or wrong, and it's not rooted in comparison to others. I sort of float very much between those two on a day-to-day basis. It's definitely not a fixed thing, and I just sort of, as performance starts to come along, I definitely try and peak towards confidence, just so I am really in touch with feeling like I'm doing the things that I want to be doing, or that I care about. So that's sort of the kind of confidence and possibly self-doubt, self-questioning that I'm mostly concerned with. Sort of leads to this, my second point of that confidence coming from being specific about the metrics by which you are judging yourself. My friends hear me talk about this all the time because I'm kind of guilty of disobeying this rule myself. Not that it's a rule. But so this sort of means in practice, always asking yourself, can I do more? Or asking maybe more specifically, how do I make this, whatever you're playing, how do I make this a more vivid version of the thing I think it is? Whether it's more joyful, more peaceful, more heartbroken, more violent, or like deranged, or whatever you feel like the character or the spirit of the music is. Thinking in those terms of how do I just bring this more to life, rather than right versus wrong or do versus don't, I think is much more constructive and conducive to confidence. It also, thinking in this way also makes your goal in the practice room and on stage more similar. I know for me, for a long time, there was sort of a big gap between what I was trying to do in the practice room and what I would get on stage and just panic and be like, what am I supposed to be actually doing? But if you are constantly looking for something, both in the practice room and on stage, then you will hopefully have more of that kind of confidence on stage. I think it's also just healthier for one's relationship to the cello and to music in the long run. Thinking like the thought process of how can I do more is extremely analytical, I think, but not judgmental. And I think that's, if that makes sense. What did I just say? Extremely analytical, but not judgmental. Yeah. So you're always, it's an active thing. There's room to self-question, but there's also room to feel positively about what you're looking for, and not labeling it as right or wrong, if that makes sense. So that's confidence, self-doubt, and then metrics. My third point, and I think this helps feed into confidence a lot, is just being in touch with what it is that you love about this whole music making this cello playing thing. It's easy, depending how things in your life are going, or things in school, or it's easy to kind of get caught up in a lot of the nitty gritty and get obsessed with maybe the wrong things, or having external pressures really take a toll. But it's important for me, at least, to keep reminding myself what it is that I love about what I'm doing. And this is sort of like, this is another thing that's different for everyone, and it could be its own cello chat. But you could love something about the music itself, whether it's harmony, structure, motives, how it's all put together, the history behind it, the interpretation in general. This scratches like a particular part of the brain for a lot of people. Sort of like, I don't know, in English class, if you're reading something and you're doing like a very close, specific reading of something, or if you're, I don't know, like a biologist, and you're relating structure to function, and like that's sort of a very particular, it's not, I don't want to say math, but like sort of just puzzle piecing in your brain that fascinates you. I think that's a great thing to latch on to. What you love about music could be just, the craft itself of playing the cello, whether you love sound production, or like feeling the vibrations of the cello, or of sound, looking for colors and all of these things, whether you love thinking about, the facility, the technique of it, efficiency, tension release in all various parts of the body. That's another thing. Some people, and this is sort of the live performance X factor, some people are just in love with like the emotion of it, the connection, the sharing in live performance. May be difficult to replicate at home in the practice room, but definitely on stage, that's where the magic happens. And, that's a thing that can be quite addicting to for people. Or it could be a combination of those three things. It's not every day that I'm in touch with all of these. But what's important is that you have like multiple pathways to tap back into your confidence. And I think just like connection with why you are doing any of the things that you are doing for any reason, definitely just feeds directly into confidence. Fourth point, I take a breath here. Fourth point comes from my earlier days as once upon a time, a pretty serious tennis player. We had a sports psychologist. His name was Grayson. If I don't know why he would be watching this, I don't know what his last name is. I was like 10 when I was going to him. But he used to talk about this thing called the mental trash can. And he was pretty serious about getting us to literally visualize when we would have negative thoughts, acknowledging the negative thought, and then physically taking it, opening the trash can, and then just like dumping it in the can, closing it, putting it aside, going on to the next point. Maybe that, this kind of visualization is not quite your speed. But what it really has to do with is just, being certain about how you talk to yourself. Negative thoughts happen. It's totally fine. But it's sort of the next step of what you do after those negative thoughts. Rephrasing your self-criticism into something actionable is important. Sort of related to the metrics thing that I was talking about earlier, where you're always asking more of yourself non-judgmentally. But I found that using this mental trash can and, knowing that I will have negative thoughts, being okay with that, but just knowing that I have to put those aside and find something positive to replace it, has, especially when I get nervous, that does wonders for my confidence. My fifth and final point is kind of just putting the first four together. And it's just that this all, I think it starts in the practice room. Some breakthroughs do happen on stage. They've certainly happened for me, but for like consistent results and maybe long-term sanity, I do think looking for confidence has to start. It has to start in practice, maybe in life somewhere, not in the practice room. And what that means for me is like every 30 minutes in my practice, I will check in with myself and like ask myself, how have I been judging myself? By what metrics have I been judging myself for the last 30 minutes? Am I in touch with what I find fascinating or what I love about this whole process? Am I talking to myself in a positive, actionable way? And very often the answer for me is no, and that's why I have to do this kind of thing. But these are sort of like habits that I'm trying to, relearn or just keep in check. And I am the kind of person that like, this is not, maybe doesn't work for everyone, but it does for me. If I am not doing sort of well with, if I'm sort of like angry practicing, or if there's a lot of negativity, I put the cello down and I go do something else. Whether it's a quick 5-minute walk or just pace around the room. I go eat a snack, go talk to a friend, go take a nap, and literally anything. Because I feel like it's really not a good use of my time if I'm just reinforcing negative instruction upon myself over and over and over again for hours on end in a practice room. It's tough to know because for most of us, especially, unless you are someone who grew up with someone kind of watching over your practice, which maybe is more common these days for a lot of us, all of our practice is largely unmonitored. So, if we're not sort of checking in with ourselves to see the kind of practice that we're doing or the kind of mentality that we have in the practice room, I can certainly really go down quite negative loopholes, and I am trying to break out of that. So that's sort of, I think it all does have to start in the practice room. The more you can do it in the practice room, the more it translates into stage. This is true of anything. And the journey has to start somewhere. Yeah. Some closing thoughts, just because I said something earlier that I want to make sure that I touched on. I said something about nerves. I haven't talked about, that's like the X factor that the X factor between the practice room and the stage, that confidence doesn't always help with, right? Like nerves are going to happen. Nerves are their own cello chat. I don't want to get into it too much. But my current thoughts on it are basically, just knowing what your tendencies are, and not just the physical tendencies of, you shaky arm, shaky leg, tight vibrato, you forget to breathe, you rush, you slow down. Those are like the physical tendencies. And then there's the psychological ones of, for me, overthinking. Some people go blank, some people lose focus, some people think too far in the past of what they just played and they're going over that in their head. Some people are thinking, too far ahead. Oh crap, this thing's coming up, that's going to be difficult. I think just the step of knowing what those tendencies are for you and being prepared for them, or just acknowledging that they're going to happen, is kind of a first step. And then, what you do with that information is kind of up to you. I'm still figuring that out. And then just the second thing that kind of helps me with nerves is, doesn't stop the nerves again. So this is more like medicine than like a preventative thing. But walking out on stage for me with a really specific focus or two, whether it's a word or a phrase that has to do with, how I want to present the music or what I think the spirit of the music is. Maybe it's a physical thing. If I just think like, exhale when you're nervous, or like keep your shoulders down, just anything to latch onto when inevitably you do get nervous and things kind of start to get shaky. Having a way to get back on is maybe more important than, never getting off in the first place, because I don't know if that's possible for any of us. Anyways, to sum it up, mentality, I think, is really important. not just for the practice room and for the stage, but I think it affects the way we live our lives and the way that we, the impact that we have on others, large and small, and how we relate to ourselves and to music and to others is definitely worth exploring. That's my little rant. I hope that was logical. But I think maybe if now is a good time, we can open it up to the chat and to the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Leland, for your insights into the mental game. And yes, if you have any questions for Leland, please type it in the chat, and I'll relay them to him. And we have our first question from River, who asks, "What's the best way to begin learning a piece? Do you try and learn the whole piece at a slow tempo, or do you go measure by measure until it's played correctly in tempo?"
That's a great question. I think this is different for everyone. I'm someone who I kind of do it measure by measure, but I don't know if that's like the best way to do it. Because I'm someone who feels weird about trying to play something if I don't understand the meaning behind it or what I think about, the piece or what each phrase or the structure is supposed to mean. So I'll like fiddle with one bar at a time or like one phrase at a time until I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And then I realize I haven't touched 99% of the piece. I have also heard people talk about how what works for them is sort of just slowly getting through the whole thing, physically getting the notes into the body and into the ears and into your brain. And if you feel like you're still flexible in that way, then once you like have it, then you can sort of build on top of that and like mold your interpretation, get it up to speed. I do a lot of metronome work slowly. I can't play things fast at first playthrough. I don't know if that answers your question, River, but it's sort of a bit of a combination, and I think you have to explore to find what really works for you.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Loa, and they ask, "Hi, Leland, how do you heal from prolonged self-doubt and lack of confidence?"
Hi, Loa. That's a great question, and I'm going to think about this because I don't have exact answers. That's something that I think I am also thinking about a lot. Knowing where the prolonged self-doubt comes from internally or externally, I think is a huge first step. Then it can be a question of like, if you feel you are that way as a person, not just in music, but also outside of it. I am someone who, I support therapy and going to this sort of thing, and just not because anyone is damaged, but just if you want to feel like you're a more stable and a better person, I think therapy is great for that kind of thing. Talking about it with your friends is another thing that helps, like the prolonged thing, and just setting yourself in an environment where you have, your friends and your teacher and your circle are all conducive to sort of confidence is important. If that's a good answer. Lo is an old friend. Message me. We can also talk about that because I want to give that a proper answer. I haven't thought about that enough, but great question.
Great. We have a question. How do you overcome imposter syndrome?
Oh, that's also a great question. This is this is maybe the danger of broaching a topic like this when I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. We're all sort of, actors in our own little theater, right? And feeling like an imposter is definitely related to comparison, I think, to others. maybe that's not entirely true. I think it is. And if there's a way to switch the focus from comparison and judgmental thinking of right versus wrong and turning that into sort of like creative thinking where it's just like the only act is like do or like more, you know, it's a little bit of what I talked about, that can sort of help a little bit with imposter syndrome. Another thing is just time helps imposter syndrome a lot, and experience. I didn't do my undergrad at university or at conservatory. I did it at university. And so when I came back wanted to do my master's in music, I definitely had a huge wave of imposter syndrome because I felt like I was just out of the loop. I hadn't been, performing, and I still feel the effects of that a little bit. Like I still feel like I'm not quite fully on the track where I should be or something. But I'm trying to balance that with just feeling like I'm in touch with the things that do make me myself, and that no one can take away from me. I hope that's a helpful answer. Also a very good question.
All right. We also have a follow-up question from Loa. She asks, during a performance, do you get tight when you're nervous? And what do you do when that happens during the performance?
Yes, I definitely get tight. It's mostly in my shoulders. They tend to come up, and then sometimes I even will bring my cello up and I get a big end pin slip. This happens more than it should. My current best advice for this is an old Paul Katz thing where he usually talks about not just breathing, but specifically exhaling when you're on stage. Exhaling can get the tension out of your body, even if it's difficult to locate where that tension is. For some people, it's in kind of your gut. Some people it's in your shoulder. Some people it's in something here. Some people it's in your legs, and that can really affect things as well. But exhaling through the mouth, so breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, I think is what they say is a good way to do it. Exhaling, big believer in exhaling.
Great. We have a question from Olivia Dorian. How much does knowing your technical ins and outs, posture, necessary muscles, etc., help with nervousness? Are they a secure foundation to build a fort against anxiety?
Repeat that for me one more time. I think I got most of that.
Yeah. How much does knowing your technical ins and outs help with nervousness? Are they a secure foundation to build a fort against anxiety?
Short answer, yes, I think so. I'm currently working part-time with Don Weilerstein, violin teacher, and he's got a poster of the human body in his studio at NEC, and he refers to it constantly as just like identifying sort of like where in the body, which bones or muscles are like give you the feeling of like power or sort of just like a confident posture. I definitely think, and so it definitely has an impact on sound, but it also helps body language, which can, that can combat a lot of stage anxiety. Bigger picture, knowing sort of the body and how you feel tension and how to release it is one pathway back to releasing. Is one pathway back to sort of dealing with anxiety. Others have to do with, what you're focused on, what you're thinking about. But just in general, yes, the more pathways that you have back, or I like the way you phrased it with sort of building this fort against anxiety. I think you said the more pathways you can have, or the more tools, I guess, you have to build that fort, the better. And the body is just one of them, I think. Great question.
All right. One more question from Loa. She asks, how do you deal with criticism?
I'm bad at that. I'm notoriously bad at that. I think translating the criticism into your own terms is important. And this is sort of like back to what I was saying about this mental trash can, or like turning your own negative thoughts into actionable ones. Some criticism is constructive. That's great. That still affects me sometimes when that's a personal thing. But just if the criticism is like harmful from whoever it is, just, taking it at face value, acknowledge that it's there, understand what it is that they are reacting to that they did not word in the most helpful way, taking that and then just dumping the rest in the can is helpful. Time also helps. I get really caught up in criticism a lot of the time, so that's that's also a good question. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yes, of course. Thank you. And we have a question from Iman. How do you balance improving technique with pushing through new repertoire, especially when you're trying to learn a lot when you're young?
Also a good question. Depends on the pieces. I guess some pieces, learning them will sort of naturally balance, or will naturally sort of teach you various techniques, or just in the search for whatever sound or communication that you're looking for, you might find along the way various technical things. If it helps, I would maybe divide a practice into, if you feel like you need to like set aside time to really do technical work, which I do, I'll usually do that at the beginning, whether it's just, raw work with the metronome or like intonation, or just thinking about like all the nitty gritty technical things, getting things to go from slower to faster. Set maybe an hour and a half for that. And then the next 30 minutes to an hour and a half will be forget about all of those things and play. I've never solved a technical thing in like a couple days. Like it does take time. But being okay kind of splitting up that work and then just doing it over a couple days repetitively and seeing if that produces some results does seem to help me. Good question.
Great. I have a question for you. Earlier you mentioned that you practice your mentality while in the practice room, and I was wondering what specifically does that look like? Does that, and you mentioned like being very analytical about your playing. So when you're doing the technical work, is that kind of being analytical? Is that kind of practicing that kind of mindset? And like, or do you like run through your pieces and try to see like where your focus wavers or?
Yeah. I think mostly what I am talking about with mentality is like actually maybe running through larger chunks in practice. I don't know if this is true I like never really watched another person practice for an extended period of time, so I don't know. But for a while I noticed that I would sort of just be like playing through my stuff, and then if I don't like a thing, I just stop and then I do it over again, and then I keep doing this, which is maybe more corrective practicing rather than like active set out with a plan practicing. And in general, I always need to be playing through larger chunks or whole movements or whole pieces more than I actually usually do. I think just the mindset of like knowing that you cannot stop for anything changes what you have to prepare beforehand. And that's sort of the mentality, the beforehand. What are you going to be focused on? How will you deal with things when they go bad and you can't, stop and go back? That needs, I think, just as much training as kind of the raw put on the metronome and figure out like every note where it's supposed to be on the fingerboard. So I do mean sort of thinking more about running through and preparing a thing for presentation.
Yeah, thank you. And another question is, when you're actually performing, and then maybe something goes off in the middle of the performance, how do you handle the mental game of like coming back from like what might be like a minor mistake, but might could potentially spiral out of control, or you can get it back on track?
Um, Couple things. The focus words that I was talking about are important for me. Just so I can, if I miss a shift and I'm like, oh God, I really wish I'd made that. Going back to just the character or the spirit of the music and like locking into that, or whatever images or stories kind of help you, gets me to forget about that a little easier. Having short-term memory loss is also nice because then you forget about the things that happened, and no, it helps you stay really present. And then also just really reminding myself and believing that, oh God, what do I like to say? It's never as good as it seems. It's never as bad as it seems. I just really believing that, I think, can help me get back on track.
Great. And we also have a question from our partners and friends at Together with Classical. If you had to introduce classical music to someone for the first time, how would you do it? And what piece would you suggest?
It would have to be live performance. I guess it wouldn't have to be, but I think that's where it gets really exciting. I would do it. I don't know. It depends who it is and what they think classical music is and what kind of experience they're looking for, how old they are, where they are in their life, where they come from. Like, maybe you want to put someone in a concert hall and sit sort of in like a state of like self-reflection, and in their own interior world, and then you have a symphony orchestra up there and then you send them through the whole journey of like Mahler's Second Symphony or something. Or I don't know, if you're doing something more like community engagement with kids, and you want them to get involved and be wild. You don't want them to sit there and sort of be so it really depends, I think, where a person is coming from. But if I had to choose, this is a great question. If I had to pick, like, sorry?
If you had to choose one piece, what would it be?
If I had to choose, does it have to be a cello thing that I'm playing, or is it just
Anything?
I guess, okay. I'm scanning through all the repertoire that's in my head. The last movement of Bartok First String Quartet, I think, is a banger, and I I don't know. I think it could really get people going. Ask me on a different day; I'll have a different answer, but that's my answer for now.
Great, thanks. Here's another question. What artists have been most influential to you in your life so far? And in what ways have they affected your approach to music?
I could talk about this for a long time. Paul Katz definitely comes to mind. Not just because this is a Cello Bello CelloChat or because I'm in Boston, but he is someone who, he always treated me like I was a more mature and more advanced version of myself than I thought I was. And he believed in me when I had a hard time kind of believing in myself. Not to mention all the values of actual cello playing and music making that that I know he really shares with everyone. So he's someone who's very important to me. Ronald Leonard, who I also spent many summers with at the Perlman Music Program. He was sort of the first person who really just like shredded me technically, and just like he put every single idea of like what every single joint in the body is supposed to be doing at any one time. And he was constantly switching up everything on me, bowing his fingerings, technical ideas, and it was just always keeping me on my toes. And I would be a much worse and much more injured frequently cellist if it weren't for him. So I'm very grateful to him. My two teachers growing up, Kirsten Peltz from when I was aged like 3 to 5 or 3 to 6, and Ron Lowry from age maybe 5 to 14. I think teaching a young person is like a completely different thing, and keeping them interested and keeping them, invested and involved in music will carry them a long way, is what I am realizing now. So I owe them everything as well. Who am I forgetting? I'll pick one more, and I'm so sorry for everyone else I've forgotten. Toby Perlman, Itzhak Perlman's wife, who runs the Perlman Music Program, and just like her obsession with music as an excuse to be better people, and like as an excuse to be a community, and as music being something so much larger than just making sound and playing an instrument. I think was worth so much, and I didn't know it at the time, but I am starting to really see that now. So, God, there's so many other people, but those are the ones that I will mention now.
Thank you. We have a question from Philip. How do you approach particularly difficult passages that were misplayed in past performances or that you feel nervous about?
If I misplayed them, I got to ask myself why. Whether it was lack of preparation, which happens sometimes, lack of coordination, whether it was just something in the moment where I got too excited and I was thinking about it. Because you can nail something so many times in the practice room, and if you feel like you just get excited about it or too excited on stage, sometimes you'll miss it, and that's fine. But knowing that and being like, okay, that was just too much excitement. Next time, keep a level head, stay in the moment, don't think too far ahead. Or I don't know, to get a thing secure, there's like multiple pathways to making it secure, right? I do a lot of, if it's like a super gnarly technical thing, I'll do a lot of different rhythms. I'll do it slurred, I'll do it.
I'm sorry about that. I think Leland's video just froze. I'm going to try and get him back on real quick. Please hold. We'll get Leland back. There you are.
Oh,
Hey.
here. When did I bounce out?
You were in the middle of explaining the way I think you practice the difficult sections.
Gotcha. Did I get to say anything about like multiple pathways and?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that was basically it. Is just so that when one thing goes astray, you still have other ways of accessing accuracy or confidence, whatever it is.
Great, thank you. Here's another question. Could you please elaborate on how you are developing your career after the traditional conservatory college studies?
Um, I don't know is the real answer. Um, I mean, I sort of had planned for a long time that I was going to want to do a master's in music um, after my undergrad at university, and then after that, it was going to be at least one more degree, whether it was a DMA, artist diploma, or graduate diploma somewhere. Um, it was just it was just a matter of once I got out of university, practice as hard as I can, apply for everything, be ready to face rejection way too many times, and like I don't know, every chance to be heard is a chance to be heard. Whether you get the thing that you are applying for or not, just putting yourself and your product out there, even if you don't feel ready, just a chance to be heard, always worth it, I think. Um, whether that's, festivals, competitions, grants, various recital things, pushing myself to learn new rep quickly and like really know what I feel like I play, and these are pieces I identify with. Because a lot of the time, undergrad, masters, we spend the time studying the concertos, sonatas, solo Bach, solo works that we're supposed to, have studied by the time we graduate. And those will form the core of a lot of our repertoire, but there's a lot else out there that I think, first of all, I wish I'd gotten a start on earlier, but now is taking up the bulk of my time for sure. Yeah, just apply for everything, take any chance to get heard, learn new rep.
Thanks. We have a question from Hubert. What, in your opinion, are technical dogmas being taught in cello teaching?
Say that one more time.
What, in your opinion, are technical dogmas being taught in cello teaching?
That's a good question. I hope I'm interpreting your question correctly, just about like if there are like general overall rules that I sort of see in common.
Yeah. Mhm.
Sure. Um, always pulling sound out of the instrument and sort of like pulling the string sideways rather than vertically trying to like push into the cello, I think is pretty universal, both from like a physics standpoint and like an ergonomic standpoint physically. Working with the string, working with the cello, and feeling like you're relaxed and not pressing. I think that's maybe the thing that I see everywhere. I was going to say some stuff about like finger individuality, where it's sort of like when you have one finger down, everything else is relaxed. But that's not something that I see taught 100%. Some people will say that if you need to stack two fingers for strength, that you should do so. And I see it work successfully all the time. It's not something personally that I like to do, but it works. And I, as long as there's strength without tension, I think that's great. What else? Did the person ask technically, or like maybe
technical stuff?
Yeah, I would say tension release is maybe the main one.
Mm-hmm. Great. We have a question from Jackson. How do you deal with the anticipation and nerves of an upcoming performance?
I learned this recently about myself, actually, but having something to practice that isn't the thing that I'm performing is actually really helpful for me. I was recently at a competition where there's just a lot of downtime, and because you're in a different city and you're not in your home, or you're not in your apartment, you can't just like lounge around, get a snack. You kind of have to go do stuff. or you're just in a practice room for a long time, having something to practice that wasn't the thing I actually had to play in the competition helped me a lot. Just keep my mind off of the thing. But while I was still playing, so I still felt like I was in playing shape. So that's kind of a weird number one answer. I grew up in sports a lot, and I'm still a kind of a runner. So especially if the concert's later in the day, I'll squeeze in a run earlier in the day just so I can, get outside, clear the mind, think about something else. Everybody's got different hobbies, right? If you're a reader, definitely bring some books. Yeah, the more things you can have to keep yourself occupied, apart from the actual task at hand, I think the better. Obviously, set aside the time you need to deal with the thing that you need to do, but apart from that, don't sit around and kind of just wait for it to happen, because I will get terrified if I do that. Great question.
Do you eat anything specific, like a banana or anything else?
I've tried a lot of different stuff. I'm a vegetarian right now, but there was a time where I was vegan for a couple months, and I think just eating, I don't digest meat well, unfortunately. This is not a food podcast, sorry. But being a runner and a tennis player, you think a lot about the fuel that you are putting into your body, whether it's a banana, whether it's other fruit, other kinds of carbohydrates or fats. I think, what is this? This is like a terrible generalization, but yes, simple sugars like bananas or other fruit, or quick snacks, the sugar will dissolve into your bloodstream in about 15 minutes. So that's usually a right before sort of situation. More complex carbohydrates, maybe 2 hours before, whether it's like whole grain, multigrain, bread, pasta, rice, very sweet potatoes, or whatever it is, that kind of fuel will take maybe 2 hours to get in the bloodstream. Fats take a little bit longer. So I don't know, like peanut butter I eat a lot of peanut butter. That takes maybe 4 hours. And just making sure the day before that I don't eat or drink anything that will just take a lot out of me to digest. I'm not a nutritionist, so don't take my word on it. And then I usually save the ice cream for afterwards. Great question.
Great, thanks. We have a question from River. Do you plan out your practice before you begin? I have trouble learning so much rep that I speed through it all, and I feel like I'm not giving the right amount of times to each piece individually.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm still trying to get that balance right for myself as well. What I'm currently doing, and this sort of comes from a friend of mine who can handle a lot of rep at once. I asked him about this, and he divides pieces, movements even, or certain passages even, into sort of three categories. There's sort of like the thing that needs maintenance pretty much every day. For a lot of people, myself included, that's showpieces or anything that you just have to move fast, and sort of like the physical coordination needs to just be touched on every day. So I put that in sort of like, so that category is like needs most time. So it's things that need maintenance, or it's the newest and I need to spend more time with it. Second category is sort of like things that, you want to touch on, but you've sort of learned it. And so I'll try and maybe hit those every other day. And then there's last category is things that ice cold. And I'll hit those every 2-3 days. And really sort of like, and that's where I'll run it. I'll put in the mental practice, but not get too nitty gritty about trying to mess with it. So splitting up your movements in all of the pieces that you're playing into those categories, and then just like making a checklist and keeping yourself accountable that you've practiced the things that you want to practice on that day. So maybe simply put, you don't have to practice everything every single day, I don't think, especially if you have a lot. It might feel weird at first. I remember making that jump. But the more comfortable you get with sort of like letting a piece sit for a day or two, that can help.
Great, thank you. Iman has a question. Would you recommend any particular method or technique book to look at daily?
Um, I unfortunately wasn't really ever on like a specific book. Ron Leonard, through actual lessons and just talking and sort of like passing on the tradition visually, he was a big proponent of the Galamian scale routine, which includes double stops, arpeggios, not just scales. And I know there are books for that out there, but I was not taught from a specific one, so I don't. I'm unfortunately maybe not the person to recommend a specific one. But there have to be like Galamian scale methods and books that are actually written out. And I will take a look at those one day and maybe recommend them. But that's my best answer. I'm sorry, I don't have a better one.
Yeah, no problem. We're heading to the end of our cello chat. So if you have any last minute questions, now's your chance. Otherwise, we will end very soon. But I have a question for you, Leland. How do you balance the need to be self-critical and like avoiding getting too self-critical and losing confidence in your playing versus the need to be confident but not being overconfident in your abilities? Do you think there's a, a method to getting the right balance of so that you have both sides?
Um, Trial and error, maybe. um, that's a great question. I don't know if confidence is like it's not like this, right? It's you're always going to be sort of back and forth, and hopefully we all have enough live performances where we get to sort of like figure out how it went and what kind of confidence we had, and then sort of like adjusting for, I felt like I played okay, but I wasn't particularly confident. Why was that? And then you sort of adjust and try and bump it up for the next one. Or if you felt like your confidence was flying like way too high and you like played terribly because you weren't prepared, like then you take a look at yourself and you go, okay, don't fall into that trap again. And then you sort of, you take yourself down a notch. But so that's maybe on that scale. And then just in the practice from balancing, self-critical versus always trying to push yourself. Yes, always ask more of yourself, but don't do it I don't want to say don't do it, but always find a way to do it that is actionable, encouraging, and like a positive loop. And so that way, you're always looking for something. Stagnation is less of a worry, hopefully. Language is, I think important in this one.
All right. I think that marks the end of questions. If you can give any closing remarks, that would be great. And I'll let you know once the live broadcast has concluded.
Sounds great. Closing remarks. Ooh, this is a fun one just because I got to have a little chat with Kim Kashkashian the other day, violist and wonderful pedagogue at NEC. And she said something that kind of blew my mind that I've still sort of been thinking about. It's maybe a little bit related to confidence and just how we talk to ourselves and how we relate to all the stuff we're doing. I was saying something about, the study of music. And then she looks at me and she says, I don't think music is a study. Music is no, what did she say? Oh, I don't want to get it wrong. She said, music is not a study. There's obviously the craft and like learning physically to play the instrument, how to do that. But music and music making is a meditation between yourself and the universe. And I still don't really know what she means by that. But I think current interpretation, or just again, wondering about all this confidence and stuff. The kind of energy that you bring to music and to others when you're performing, whether it's people on stage with you or the people in the audience, that energy matters. And so how you relate to the world, to music, to others, and the kind of confidence that you bring to it, to meditation with the universe. It's all a reflection of who you are. And I think the more you can, find a way to be in touch with that and do that in a really positive way, that meditation becomes more rewarding, I think. Yeah, let's leave it at that. I think that's maybe a good place to stop.
All right, thank you so much, Leland. Thanks again for your wonderful insights. And just as a reminder, Cello Bello is a nonprofit organization. So if you enjoyed this chat and would like to make a contribution, the link will be in the comment section. So thank you for joining.